I thought I had the perfect life. Dream house with cutting-edge solar tech, prestigious career saving the planet, and a wife who seemed to worship the ground I walked on. Until one day my elderly neighbor dropped a truth bomb that shattered my eco-friendly bubble. Son, I hate to tell you this, but while you're out there saving the earth, someone else is drilling on your property. That conversation triggered a chain of events that would make me question everything I believed in. And trust me, my response? It's not what you'd expect from a tree-hugging environmental specialist. Life is a funny way of teaching us lessons we never asked for. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I chose to ignore, all the warning signs I brushed aside because I was too busy being the perfect husband. But hey, hindsight is always 20/20, right? Let me tell you my story. Maybe it'll help someone out there avoid the same mistakes I made. My name's David Mitchell, and 3 years ago, I had what most people would call the American dream. I was living in a modern eco-friendly house in Denver with my wife Sarah, working as a renewable energy specialist for a growing green tech company. We were at the forefront of the solar revolution, and I was making good money helping businesses transition to sustainable energy solutions. I even took on additional consulting projects for smaller companies on weekends, not because we needed the money, but because I believed in building a sustainable future, both for the planet and for our family. The company I worked for, Green Tech Solutions, was expanding rapidly. I'd just been promoted to lead project manager, overseeing the installation of solar farms across 3 states. It was demanding work, but I loved every minute of it. There's something incredibly satisfying about knowing you're making a real difference in the world. My team respected me, and my boss was already hinting at another promotion on the horizon. Life seemed perfect, you know? Sarah and I met at an environmental conference in Boulder, where she was giving a presentation on environmental law reform. I was instantly captivated by her passion for sustainability and her quick wit. We dated for 2 years and got married in an outdoor ceremony powered entirely by solar panels. Yeah, we were that couple. She worked at a prestigious environmental law firm, and together we thought we were going to save the world one solar panel at a time. Even our honeymoon was eco-friendly. We spent 2 weeks at a sustainable resort in Costa Rica, helping with their renewable energy initiatives. Every morning, she'd make us both organic coffee in reusable cups, kiss me goodbye, and send me sweet texts throughout the day. Missing my green warrior. Can't wait for our farmer's market date. You're making the world better. That kind of stuff. We had our weekly rituals. Saturday mornings at the local farmer's market, Sunday bike rides through the city, and monthly tree planting events with our environmental activist group. I ate it all up, thinking I was the luckiest guy in the world. Man, if I could go back and talk to that version of myself, I'd have a lot to say. But would I have listened? Probably not. When you're in love, you wear rose-colored glasses and red flags just look like flags. That's what makes betrayal so devastating. It's not just the act itself. It's the shattering of everything you believe to be true. Little did I know that my perfect eco-friendly life was about to come crashing down, starting with a conversation that would change everything. But before I get to that part, let me be clear. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about survival, about rebuilding, and about learning that sometimes the best response to betrayal isn't confrontation. It's strategic silence. It was a scorching hot day in Denver when my world started to unravel. I just finished a 12-hour day installing solar panels at a new development site. The kind of day where your shirt sticks to your back, and all you can think about is a cold shower and your comfortable couch. I was dog-tired, but satisfied with the work we'd completed. Our team had managed to install twice the number of panels we'd planned, putting us ahead of schedule. I pulled into our driveway around 7 p.m., my work truck kicking up dust from the eco-friendly gravel we'd chosen instead of concrete. The setting sun was painting the solar panels on our roof in shades of orange and gold. Usually a sight that filled me with pride, but today something felt off. Maybe it was my sixth sense kicking in, or maybe the universe was trying to give me a heads up. Mrs. Rodriguez, our elderly neighbor from 2 doors down, was watering her drought-resistant garden. We'd helped her design it last spring, and she'd always been sweet to Sarah and me. But today, she had this look on her face. You know the one, where someone's carrying a weight they're not sure they should unload. David, she called out, her voice lower than usual. Could you spare a minute? I was beat, but Mrs. Rodriguez had brought us homemade tamales when we first moved in, and she'd always kept an eye on our house when we were away at environmental conferences. The least I could do was talk to her. I walked over, wiping the sweat from my forehead with my sleeve. "Sure, Mrs. R. What's on your mind?" She twisted the garden hose in her hands, water dripping onto her organic vegetable patch. "I've been debating whether to tell you this," she started, her eyes darting toward my house. "I don't like to meddle in other people's business, but—" She paused, took a deep breath. "I've seen someone come into your house while you're at work. A man." I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. It had to be a misunderstanding. "Oh, that's probably just one of Sarah's colleagues from the law firm. They sometimes have meetings here, since we have the home office set up." Mrs. Rodriguez shook her head slowly, her eyes full of concern. "David Iho, I've been around long enough to know the difference between a business meeting and something else. This man, he comes when you're gone. Always the same one. They don't look like they're discussing law." The hose in her hands was still running, creating a small puddle around her prized tomato plants. "The way they act, it's not professional. The blinds are usually closed, but sometimes—" She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with what she'd witnessed. I stood there, feeling like someone had just pulled the ground out from under my feet. The evening breeze felt suddenly cold against my skin. My mind started racing through the past few months. The late nights at her firm, the environmental law conferences that seemed to pop up more frequently, the way she'd been so supportive of my long hours at work. "Are you sure?" I heard myself ask, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. She reached out and patted my arm, her eyes full of sympathy. "I wish I wasn't Iho. I've seen them together at least 5 or 6 times in the past month alone. Always around 2 p.m., always the same silver Tesla." She paused. "I thought you should know." I nodded mechanically, mumbled something about appreciating her telling me, and walked back to my house. Each step felt heavier than the last. The solar panels on our roof no longer looked like symbols of our shared dream for a better future. They just looked like expensive decorations on a house of lies. I spent that night in my home office, unable to concentrate on anything. Mrs. Rodriguez's words kept echoing in my mind. After hours of tossing and turning, I knew I needed proof, either to confirm my fears or put them to rest. The next morning, after Sarah left for her important court hearing, I drove to Best Buy instead of the work site. I called Mark, my team lead, saying I'd be late due to equipment issues. Standing in the security aisle, I felt sick to my stomach as I compared different camera models. The sales guy kept pushing for a full security system, but I just picked 3 small, Wi-Fi-enabled cameras with good battery life and motion detection. Back home, I positioned them carefully. One in the living room, hidden among our environmental awards. Another in the hallway, concealed behind Sarah's new spider plant. The third one in the home office, tucked between the solar monitoring equipment. Each camera felt like another betrayal, but I needed to know the truth. Testing the feeds on my phone, I made sure everything worked perfectly. 3 views of our eco-friendly home appeared on my screen, each angle capturing the space we'd built together. The same space that now felt like it was suffocating me. For the next few days, I tried to act normal. I went to work, installed solar panels, came home tired. But my phone felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. Every notification made my heart race, though I forced myself not to check during the day. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon during a client meeting. A motion alert from the living room camera. I excused myself and rushed to my truck. Opening the app with shaking hands, I saw Sarah letting a man into our house. Tall, well-dressed, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. They sat close on our bamboo fiber couch, drinking from our recycled glass, wedding gift wine glasses. When he leaned in to kiss her, she didn't hesitate. They moved upstairs, out of view, but I'd seen enough. The worst part wasn't even the stranger in my house. It was how comfortable they seemed together, their easy familiarity suggesting this was far from the first time. I sat in my truck, the afternoon sun burning through the windshield, as reality crashed down around me. All those late nights she'd encouraged, all those weekend consulting jobs she'd supported. Had she been supporting my absence rather than my ambition? The solar panels I'd installed were meant to power our future together. Instead, they'd been powering her deception. They say revenge is best served cold, but I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted something cleaner, something that wouldn't leave a trail of drama in its wake. I needed to disappear, but I had to be smart about it. As a renewable energy specialist, I knew that the most efficient systems work silently, without drawing attention. That's exactly how I would handle this. First, I created a detailed spreadsheet of our finances, a skill I developed tracking solar panel installations and project budgets. We had a joint account at Wells Fargo, my personal account at Chase, and several investment accounts in sustainable energy companies. Sarah had always been happy to let me handle the money side of things, trusting my analytical mind, as she called it. I opened a new account with an international online bank, using my work email instead of our shared home address. Then I started moving money in small increments, $500 here, $700 there. Nothing that would raise red flags. I calculated that I could move my fair share within 3 months without arousing suspicion. The credit cards were trickier. We had 3 joint cards, all tied to eco-friendly reward programs. I told Sarah I'd found a better green rewards program with another bank and suggested we consolidate our accounts. She barely looked up from her phone as she agreed, probably texting him. I closed the joint cards one by one, moving my portion of the credit to a new card in my name only. At work, I started documenting all my projects meticulously, preparing to hand them over. I reached out to my contacts in the renewable energy sector, quietly asking about opportunities abroad. A former colleague mentioned a solar farm project in Costa Rica that needed an experienced supervisor. Perfect, somewhere warm, far away, with plenty of sunshine for both solar panels and new beginnings. I put together a resignation letter, but didn't submit it yet. Timing would be crucial. I also started selling off some of our joint possessions, the extra solar equipment in the garage, the electric bike we never used. Sarah didn't notice. She was too busy with her environmental law cases. Each night, I'd lie in bed next to her, listening to her steady breathing, and feel like I was sleeping next to a stranger. Sometimes she'd reach for her phone, probably to text him, thinking I was asleep. I kept my own breathing steady, already practicing the art of invisibility. The hardest part was acting normal during the day. I still kissed her goodbye in the mornings, still responded to her texts about dinner plans and weekend activities. But each gesture felt like a performance now. Each smile a mask I wore while I orchestrated my departure. I was building a bridge to my future, one careful step at a time, and she had no idea she was about to be left on the other side. I spent my last night in what I once called home, methodically checking every detail of my departure plan. Sarah was sleeping upstairs, exhausted after another late meeting at the firm. The house felt eerily quiet at 2 a.m., with only the soft hum of our energy-efficient appliances breaking the silence. Each room held memories that now felt tainted. In my home office, I did one final check of my preparations. The new bank account was ready, with enough money moved to start fresh. My Costa Rica job offer was secured. They needed my expertise for their massive solar farm project. I'd sold my car yesterday, leaving the eco-friendly hybrid to Sarah. My packed bag contained only essentials: clothes, documents, and professional certifications. The kitchen still smelled of coffee from this morning, organic fair trade beans Sarah had insisted on buying. On the counter lay our gardening plans, ambitious designs for a sustainable backyard that would never be realized now. Funny how she'd been so concerned about environmental impact while carelessly destroying our marriage. The living room walls displayed our collection of environmental awards and certificates. Each one represented long hours of work, dedication to a cause we'd supposedly shared. Now they just seemed like props in a play that had run its course. I carefully removed my photos from the frames, leaving gaps that Sarah would discover later. I'd spent weeks gradually moving my possessions to a storage unit across town. The closets were half empty now, though Sarah never noticed. Too busy with her phone, probably texting him. The remaining clothes would be donated tomorrow, another loose end tied up neatly. At 4 a.m., I entered our bedroom one last time. Sarah slept peacefully, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to crumble. My wedding ring, recycled gold because we'd insisted everything in our life be sustainable, felt heavy as I slid it off. I placed it on her nightstand, next to her phone that still occasionally lit up with late-night messages. Standing there in the darkness, I thought about leaving a note. But what was there to say? The empty closets, the missing photos, the abandoned ring. They would tell the story clearly enough. 8 years of marriage ended not with a fight or tears, but with quiet calculations and careful planning. At exactly 4:30 a.m., I shouldered my bag and took one final look around. The solar panels on our roof would soon catch the first rays of sunrise, but I wouldn't be here to see it. I stepped out into the pre-dawn chill, closing the door with a soft click. My Uber waited at the corner, headlights dim in the darkness. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. Sometimes the most sustainable choice is knowing when to let go. Sarah's morning started like any other. Her alarm chimed at 7 a.m., playing that eco-friendly meditation music she'd chosen. She reached for her phone first, as always, probably checking for messages from him. It took her a full minute to notice the wedding ring sitting beside her phone. She picked up the ring, confused. Then she noticed the silence in the house. No sound of the shower running. No smell of fair trade coffee brewing downstairs. "David," she called out, her voice echoing through the empty rooms. The echo seemed to mock her as she got up and walked to his side of the closet. The door stood open, revealing rows of empty hangers swaying slightly in the air-conditioning breeze. Her heart started racing as she moved through the house, calling his name with increasing urgency. The home office, once cluttered with his project files and sustainability reports, was eerily bare. Only the solar monitoring system still blinked steadily on the wall, tracking energy that would power a now-broken home. In the kitchen, she grabbed her phone and dialed his number. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried again and again. Each attempt met with the same electronic response. "The number you are trying to reach is not available." Her hands shaking, she called his office at the solar company. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell," his colleague Mark said, sounding uncomfortable. "David resigned last week. He said he was moving on to a new opportunity." Last week? She felt the room spin as the implications hit her. While she'd been going about her daily routine, he'd been planning his exit. She rushed to their shared computer, but the password had been changed. Opening the banking app on her phone revealed another shock. Their joint account was nearly empty, with just enough left to cover the monthly bills. Her own salary wouldn't hit the account for another week. Panic really set in then. She called their friends, his co-workers, even his parents. Nobody had seen him. Nobody knew where he'd gone. As the day wore on, the truth became unavoidable. David hadn't just left for the day. He'd vanished completely, taking with him every trace of their 8 years together. That evening, she sat alone in their eco-friendly house, surrounded by the solar panels and energy certificates that had meant so much to him. Her phone lay silent. Even her lover seemed distant now, perhaps sensing the chaos in her messages. The house felt different, as if it too knew its foundation had been irreparably cracked. Looking back, she could see all the signs she'd missed. His late nights at work had tapered off recently. He'd been unusually interested in the banking arrangements. He'd even helped her set up that new rewards credit card last month. Right before closing their joint accounts, she now realized. The ring still sat on her nightstand, a cold circle of recycled gold that now seemed to represent not their sustainable love, but the complete sustainability of his departure. She thought she was so clever, hiding her affair behind late meetings and networking events. Turns out she wasn't the only one who could keep secrets. After a week of frantic calls and desperate emails, Sarah realized she needed professional help. That's how she found herself sitting across from James Cooper, a private investigator recommended by her law firm. His office was small but efficient, much like the man himself. "Tell me about your husband's work," Cooper said, pen poised over his notepad. Sarah explained David's role in renewable energy, his consulting work, the extra projects he'd taken on. Each detail she shared felt like another piece of a puzzle she should have solved earlier. "He was a specialist in solar installations," she explained, "always traveling to different sites, meeting with clients." Her voice trailed off as she remembered how she'd encouraged those long hours, those weekend consultations. She'd practically gift-wrapped his escape opportunities. Cooper's investigation revealed frustratingly little. David's resignation had been properly filed, all paperwork in order. His last paycheck had been deposited and transferred immediately. The security cameras at their local bank showed him closing their joint accounts personally, perfectly legal since both names were on them. "What about his car?" Cooper asked. Sarah learned it had been sold to a dealership 2 states away. The payment had gone directly into an account she'd never known existed. Even their hybrid car, which she'd thought was just in the shop, had been legally transferred to her name a month ago. The private investigator tracked David's phone to a shipping center in Houston, where it had been sold for parts. His email accounts were closed, social media deleted. He'd even transferred his professional certifications to a new address, a P.O. box that turned out to be defunct. Your husband, Cooper said during their third meeting, planned this meticulously. Every transaction was legal, every paper properly filed. He didn't just disappear. He orchestrated a complete dissolution of his previous life. Sarah spent thousands on the investigation, draining her personal savings. Cooper followed leads across 3 states, but each one ended in another dead end. David had covered his tracks with the same attention to detail he'd once applied to his solar installation projects. The final blow came when Cooper discovered that David had been steadily selling their joint assets for months. The extra equipment in the garage, their shared investments, even their vacation timeshare, all liquidated and transferred through a series of perfectly legal transactions. I've seen many people try to disappear, Cooper said, closing his notebook. But your husband, he didn't just vanish. He evaporated, leaving no trace, like morning dew under the sun he used to harness. Costa Rica turned out to be exactly what I needed. The solar farm project kept me busy during the day, while the peaceful evenings helped heal wounds I hadn't even known were there. My small apartment in San Jose offered views of mountains instead of Denver's cityscape, and somehow that made all the difference. The work was challenging in the best way possible. We were building one of the largest solar installations in Central America, bringing sustainable power to communities that had never had reliable electricity. Each successful connection felt like a personal victory, a reminder that I could still make a positive impact despite my own broken connections. I kept my routine simple. Work, evening walks in a local park, occasional dinners at a small cafe near my apartment. The owner, Maria, would practice her English while I fumbled through basic Spanish. She'd laugh at my pronunciation, and I'd smile at her corrections. It felt genuine, unlike the forced smiles I'd grown used to back home. 6 months into my new life, I hardly thought about Sarah anymore. The betrayal had lost its sting, replaced by a calm acceptance that sometimes endings are necessary for new beginnings. I checked my old email once, finding hundreds of unread messages from Sarah, her lawyers, and the private investigator she'd hired. I deleted the account without reading them. Maria and I grew closer gradually. She'd save me a quiet table in the corner of her cafe, bringing me local dishes to try without asking. We'd talk about everything and nothing. Her dreams of expanding the cafe, my work with the solar project, the simple joy of starting fresh. She never pushed for details about my past, and I appreciated that more than she knew. One evening, as we walked through the park after closing time, she took my hand. It felt natural, like the transition from darkness to dawn. You seem lighter now, she said, her accent wrapping around the words. When you first came here, you carried much darkness. Now you have light in your eyes. She was right. The man who'd fled Denver in the pre-dawn hours had been a shadow of himself, weighed down by betrayal and lies. But here, under the Costa Rican sun, I'd found something I thought I'd lost forever. The ability to trust again, to feel joy without waiting for the other shoe to drop. The solar farm project was nearing completion, but I'd already accepted a permanent position with the company. Maria's cafe was thriving, and we'd started talking about opening a second location together. For the first time in years, I was building something real, with someone who valued honesty as much as I did. Life had a funny way of working out. I'd come to Costa Rica to disappear, but instead, I'd found myself again. Each morning, watching the sun rise over the solar panels I'd helped install, I felt grateful for the painful lesson that had led me here. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you really need. The local farmers market had become my Saturday morning routine. Maria and I were picking out fresh vegetables for the cafe when I felt it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. I turned, and there she was, Sarah, standing between stalls of tropical fruit, looking as out of place as a snowflake in summer. She'd lost weight, and her usually perfect hair was frizzy in the Costa Rican humidity. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, almost. Then I remembered all those nights she'd come home late, all those important meetings that smelled of another man's cologne. I watched her process what she was seeing. My hand casually intertwined with Maria's, the easy comfort between us, the local vendors greeting me by name. This wasn't the broken man she'd probably expected to find, the David she'd known, the one who'd worked endless hours on solar installations while she carried on her affair, had vanished like morning mist under the tropical sun. She took a step forward, my name forming on her lips. Maria squeezed my hand, sensing the tension, but staying quiet. Around us, life continued as normal. Vendors calling out prices, children running between stalls, the aroma of fresh coffee mixing with ripe mangoes. David, Sarah finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been looking everywhere for you. I studied her like I would a stranger, because that's what she was now. A stranger wearing the face of someone I used to know. The woman I'd married, the one I thought would help me save the world one solar panel at a time, had never really existed. I'm sorry, I said, my voice calm and steady. Do I know you? The words hit her harder than any accusation could have. I watched the color drain from her face as she realized. This wasn't a confrontation or a reconciliation. This was the end, delivered with the same quiet finality as my departure had been. Sarah opened her mouth to speak again, but I had already turned away, guiding Maria toward our favorite coffee stand. Behind us, I heard a choked sob, but I didn't look back. Some energy isn't worth recycling, and some connections are better left severed. Later, Maria asked me about the encounter. She's someone I used to know, I said simply. In another life, Maria nodded, understanding that sometimes the kindest response to betrayal is complete disconnection. We spent the rest of the day planning the cafe's new solar installation, my past fading like footprints in beach sand. 2 years have passed since that unexpected meeting at the farmer's market. Life here in Costa Rica has taken on a rhythm I never knew I needed, filled with genuine moments rather than carefully maintained appearances. Maria and I married last spring in a ceremony powered by solar panels I'd installed myself. Unlike my first wedding, this wasn't about showing off our eco-credentials. It was about celebrating real love with people who mattered. The local community we'd grown to love gathered under the warm sun, and for once, everything felt authentic. Our chain of solar-powered cafes has become something of a local phenomenon. What started as a single location has grown into 3 successful restaurants, each one powered entirely by renewable energy. The solar farm project that brought me here has expanded too. We're now consulting for similar projects across Central America, bringing clean energy to communities that need it most. Last month, Maria shared news that changed everything. We're expecting our first child. As we stood on our balcony that evening, watching the sun set behind the mountains, I felt a kind of peace I'd never known with Sarah. Back then, the idea of starting a family had always been theoretical, pushed aside for her important cases. Now I understand why. You can't build a future on a foundation of lies. Our home isn't anything like my old eco-mansion in Denver, but it's filled with more warmth and honesty than that house ever knew. We have a small herb garden that supplies our cafe, solar panels that power our daily life, and now a nursery I'm setting up for a little one. Maria jokes that our baby's first words will probably be solar panel, given how much time I spend talking about renewable energy. The private investigator Sarah hired still sends occasional emails to my old accounts. Through industry connections, I heard that she eventually married her environmental lawyer. I felt nothing when I learned this. No anger, no satisfaction, not even indifference. Just acknowledgement of a fact, like noting the weather. Maria understands my past without needing every detail. She knows there was betrayal, knows I chose disappearance over confrontation. But she also knows that what we've built together is stronger because of those lessons. Trust, like solar energy, only works when everything is transparent and true. Our baby is due in December. We've already started planning the nursery, complete with star-shaped solar-powered night lights I designed myself. Maria wants to name the baby Luna if it's a girl or Sol if it's a boy. She says our child should be named after the lights that guided us to each other. Sometimes in the quiet moments, when Maria's asleep and I'm working on plans for our next solar installation, I think about how it all unfolded. The neighbor who warned me, the cameras that confirmed my fears, the carefully planned escape. It seems like another lifetime, but I wouldn't change any of it. That pain led me here, to this life, to real happiness. The sun is setting now as I write this, casting long shadows through our solar panels. Maria is in the kitchen, singing softly in Spanish as she prepares dinner. The evening breeze carries the scent of her cooking mixed with tropical flowers from our garden. This is what contentment feels like, not the carefully maintained kind I used to have, but something authentic and true. Tomorrow, I'll wake up early to check on our solar installations, then help Maria open the cafe. We'll serve customers, share stories, and continue building our life together. It's not the future I'd planned 5 years ago, but it's better than anything I could have imagined. Sometimes the best things in life come after the worst betrayals. You just have to be brave enough to walk away and start again.